Hello, in this lecture we're going to look at reading F-sharp type signatures. We'll look at how they differ from methods and how they differ from C# and Java. So first up, what are type signatures? Well, in an object-oriented language, particularly C# or Java, we care a lot about the name and especially the details of how that function works. The only exception to this is really interfaces, but we still do care about the underlying implementation. And what we're really talking about here is the inputs and outputs of a method or a function. As we start to move more to F# and functional programming, we care more about functions and how the inputs and outputs relate to each other. So as we move more to using F#, we'll start to find that it's less about the details and the name of the function, but more about what the types are, what the inputs and what the outputs are on that function. And the reason being is that as we move to F#, they found that there are like 9 times more types declared than there are in an equivalent C# code base. This may seem like a lot of work, but it's actually not that much. In F# it's really easy to create types or classes. And so by using types, we can then constrain the inputs and the outputs of our function, and then all we need to do is make sure that those types line up. And that way, as long as the types line up, we don't care too much about the details. It's what gives F# the reputation of if it compiles, it'll work. That's how we're able to achieve that. So this all starts by being able to understand the type signature of a function or a method. So let's look at C#. So here's a simple method declaration here. This is what we would expect to see. And as we already know, there's the return type on the left and the input type on the right hand side. So now let's consider this in F#. So again, the exact same method declared the same way. We can see the return type comes at the end and the input type comes before, in the same place where C# is. So now let's have a look at what the type signature for this looks like. So we've got the same method here, the F# method, and now we can see here's the type signature for it. So we can see there's the input type coming first and the return type. And we do have the name declared here at the start, but that's not always needed. We can see that the arrow means that this is a function, right? So that's really important that there is an arrow there. If there's no arrow and you just see the value, then it is just a value. It's just a binding or a variable. So calling this from C#, if you're calling a method with multiple arguments, then you'll see it in a tupled or carried form. It'll have parentheses with an asterisk in the middle. So that's kind of the C# style. And now looking at a few examples, so we can see toUpper, so it's a single input, a single output, so we're using string. ToString, obviously there's no input, right? Yeah, we've discussed this before, that unit is the same as void. And it obviously returns a single argument there, just a string. And then we've got the join function here, so it takes in 2 strings and then returns 1 string. We'll now look at how F# handles multiple parameters. So how do we declare this stuff in F#? We talked about C# having multiple parameters. Well, F# has a slightly different style, so you can declare a method separated by a space. And as you can see, it changes the F# type signature down the bottom. So it means that multiple parameters are separated by an arrow. So you see string, arrow, string, arrow, string. So again, the last item there is a return type. This function takes in 2 strings and returns another string. Of course, we can do it on the C# style as well. So the C#, we've already seen how the type signature looks at the bottom. To do that in the method, we would separate it with parentheses and a comma around the arguments there. So now how do we see these type signatures? Well, in Visual Studio, all you need to do is just hover over the method with your mouse and you'll see the little highlight, and this will show you something similar to this. So the key part here is to start to focus on the types, and we can see here on the top one, I mean these are the same functions that we saw before, but we can see a single input, a single output, and if you just look at the types you can sort of guess what the function will do. In this case we're just using strings, and that's not the best type. We generally want to avoid strings because a string could be anything, right? It could be URL, it could be a username, it could be password. We could create types out of those. But for the focus of this now is that you can sort of see how these types might declare. And the B function here is probably less useful because we want to avoid using unit. We'll see this more and more as we get through the course and as we move to more of the functional design systems, that focusing on having types coming in and out and avoiding unit is a better approach. And finally, down the bottom here, we've got 2 inputs going to a single output. So by just seeing the types, you can already start to see how the system will behave. You don't need to worry too much about the details of what's happening underneath. That's it for now. I hope that helps as we explore the subsequent lectures.